What's going on, everybody? I'm just coming at you again. Not doing really a garden update because there's not really a bunch to update. That you didn't see last time. Nothing's really changed a bunch. Pumpkins are growing, sunflowers are growing. We're still getting some beans, but they're starting to slow down. They'll probably be done here pretty soon. Like I said, I'm letting one of the plants go. I'm letting the beans stay on the vine and dry to go to seed, so I can store them and use them again. And so far, all the trees are doing all right. So far, I haven't noticed any damage from the frost that we had the other night. We haven't gotten any freezes, which is good, but we did have some frost the other night. So I did what I could to get them ready for that, but hopefully it'll do nothing, but if it does anything, maybe it'll just burn some of the leaves, and it won't hurt the tree. Like the leaves will, just die and fall off, and the tree will keep going. But I know, like the kale that I'm growing, frost won't bother it. In fact, a lot of times those kind of things, your greens and your cruciferous vegetables, they do pretty well. They actually taste better if they have a little bit of a frost. So I still haven't planted any broccoli. I can't decide if I want to do that or not. It's a little late, but I'm willing to risk it here because we don't have extreme cold. And if there's a freeze or anything, I would just cover it. But I haven't done it yet. I think that I have broccoli seeds, but I don't know if I want to try to do it from seed or if I want to go buy broccoli starts if I can find any, because I've heard that the starts are kind of picked over this year. But either way, nothing's really changed in the garden, so that's why I haven't done a video since last week on it. And I may or may not do one tomorrow. There's just not really a bunch to show, nothing really new going on. So I had thought about talking about some soil amendments / fertilizers. I've kind of touched on it before, but like I said, the first thing I would recommend anybody do is to go and get a soil analysis. I say go and get. You do it yourself. You collect samples of your soil and you send it off. Like for me, I send it off to the University of Florida, and they run an analysis on it, email me back with the results, and then I have an idea of what I want to put in the soil. So once you have that, I mean, you don't have to do that, but I think that's a much better way of doing it than just guessing, just randomly guessing what you need to do, how you need to fertilize. So once you have that, you can see the macronutrients you need, and it'll show you some of the micronutrients you need. And there are other things that you can have them, I kind of look like I'm glowing there. There are other things you can have them test for, but basically you just look for the micronutrients and the macronutrients. And the micronutrient level is something that really only needs to be messed with very lightly. For example, you can buy, if your soil is very low in copper, you can buy copper to use in the garden, but it's one of those things where you use it sparingly. You don't want to overdo it because that could damage the plants. So sometimes you're putting like maybe teaspoons or something like that in like a mix of, if you're going to mix your own fertilizer. So, but of course, like we've talked about, the macronutrients are the NPK, which stands for nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. It's they're the periodic symbols. So a lot of times nitrogen is low, and a simple way to fix nitrogen is, if you want just a quick and easy way to put nitrogen into the soil, is go get some blood meal. It's made from blood from animals from slaughterhouses, and it stinks to high heaven, but and you have to be careful with it, because you can burn your plants really easily with too much nitrogen. But if your soil needs a hit of nitrogen, take a look at your soil analysis, kind of figure out what you need, because it'll say, for like 100 square feet, this is what you need, this is what's lacking, or whatever. So what you would do is take a look at that, try to figure out. A lot of the bags that you buy will have kind of an instructions on the back, kind of figure out how much of blood meal would I need for 100 square feet, and then you can break it down from there if you're doing smaller gardens, bigger gardens, whatever. And then, either measure it out, weigh it out, however you do it, sprinkle it all around the soil, rake it in, and that's a good hit of nitrogen. If you need things like calcium, and I believe it's got phosphorus, possibly potassium, you've got stuff like bone meal, and this is all stuff that's readily available at any of your big box stores. You can get it at Walmart, you can get it at Home Depot, and even your smaller garden centers, like your smaller nurseries and stuff, probably have some form of blood meal, bone meal, feather meal, that sort of thing. Another way you can get nitrogen, and I have not seen this in a big box store or anything like that, but you can order it online, is alfalfa meal. Cottonseed meal is another one. And you can sprinkle that and do the same thing you would with the blood meal. But again, with nitrogen, be careful you don't burn your plants. So you have all those single, for lack of a better word, ingredient or single purpose fertilizers. Like if you sprinkle blood meal, it's not going to give you any phosphorus, it's not going to give you any potassium, it's just nitrogen. So, it may give you trace amounts of the others, but it's nitrogen. But you can buy, if your soil analysis says your soil isn't bad, but you need nitrogen, you can go buy some blood meal, alfalfa meal, cotton meal, and only amend the nitrogen. If your analysis says you need phosphorus, you can do it. Same thing with phosphorus. If your analysis says you need potassium, same thing. You can get stuff that's either purely potassium or is, very high in potassium and low in other things. Something that's good to use for potassium is ashes. You can, burn some brush or whatever, and burn it to ashes, and then take the ashes and be careful again how much you put in, because it's very potent. But you can sprinkle some ashes in, and that's a good source of natural potassium. Of course, you can take the charcoal from the leftover brush, crumble that up, soak it in a liquid fertilizer, and you will have biochar. And it's called charged biochar. And you don't really want to put it in the soil without it being charged, because it will suck up all the nutrients that are in it. Because charcoal works like that. It's very porous and very absorbent. So you charge it by soaking it in a liquid fertilizer, then you add it to the soil, and it will kind of slow release that fertilizer into the soil. So, you know, you can do things like fish emulsions. You can do things like kelp liquid fertilizers. You could even get the blue crystal Miracle Grow and soak it in that. You can make your own by making either aerobic or anaerobic compost tea, and then soak the biochar in that. But yeah, you need to charge it. It's called charging it. You need to charge it first before you put it in the ground. Otherwise, it'll suck all the nutrients that are in the ground out of the ground and starve your plants. So, but yeah, you can do all those single-purpose, specific amendments if you know you need specific things. That's why I say it's so important to get a soil analysis, because you may only need some nitrogen. And if you know that's all you need, you can go buy a source of nitrogen, put it in the soil, and you're good to go. You don't have to, you know, go buy, you know, mixed fertilizers. You don't have to, you know, guess at what you need to do. But on the other hand, there are also mixed fertilizers, which I use mixed fertilizers. For example, in my garden, I know that there are some micronutrients that I could address. But what I did when I got my soil analysis back, I needed, like I've talked about before, I needed nitrogen and potassium, plus my soil was acidic. So I bought a bag of, like I've shown, well, at the time I bought containers of a mixed fertilizer that was higher in nitrogen and lower in phosphorus. My soil is very high in phosphorus, so I don't need it. And then you've seen the bag that I use right now. That's the Espoma mixed fertilizer. It's actually a citrus and avocado blend, but I'm looking at what are the specifications, what's the NPK reading, and it's higher in nitrogen and potassium and lower in phosphorus. So you can also go that route if you need multiple nutrients, and you don't necessarily need a huge hit of it. You can always buy mixed fertilizers. An old-fashioned, well, I say old-fashioned, but a kind of a mainstream run-of-the-mill fertilizer is 10-10-10. That's going to be chemical fertilizer. If you're okay with using chemical fertilizer, then go ahead. If you want organic, look for organic. They have liquid organic and they have granular organic. I've used both, and excuse me, there's some road construction going on, and that bump is terrible. But I've used both. I prefer, if I'm going to do fertilizer like that, to just get granular, work it into the soil before I plant, and then probably once the plants start flowering and putting on fruit and stuff, I'll do it again, kind of around the plants. I'll cut in some more fertilizer just to help them with the fruiting process. But you have, I'm glowing again. You've got, I'm trying to get kind of out of the light. I'm gonna have to leave my arm up. You've got various mixed varieties of fertilizer with various numbers, so always pay attention to the NPK. You can also read the ingredients on the back and see. A lot of times if you buy organic, it'll be, you know, a mix of like feather meal, bone meal, blood meal, earthworm castings, which is another good fertilizer. Some of them will have manure in it. I think it's risky to use manure. Go watch some of David the Good's videos on using purchased manure because of the aminopyrrolid that is still in it. Aminopyrrolid is a type of plant killer that they will use on pastures to kill anything except for the grass, because basically they want they don't want a bunch of other stuff growing except for grass, because they're trying to make hay or they're trying to pasture animals, and it doesn't kill grass, and it lingers in stuff like hay and in manure. So if you buy manure, there's a chance that the cows or the it's usually cows, although you can use goat manure and stuff like that. You can use horse manure, but you have to compost it for a while because it's really, really high in nitrogen, also called hot. It's very hot. But you have to where was I going with this? You have to be careful with that, because the aminopyrrolids, I think the big brand name is Grazon, it will still linger even after being digested by cattle. And so people will buy or bring in manure and it still has those aminopyrrolid compounds in it, put it in their garden, and it wrecks their garden. And now that it's in your garden, it's going to stay in your garden for possibly years. It's a long-lasting herbicide, and if that's the case, the only thing you're going to be able to grow is anything that is a type of grass, because it doesn't affect grass. So you could grow things like corn, you could grow things like lemongrass, you could grow things possibly like, you know, bamboo or sugarcane, something like that, but you cannot grow any sort of vegetables at all. It will kill it pretty much dead on arrival type thing. So be very careful with bringing in manure if you don't know that it has or doesn't have Grazon in it. But I don't think manure is used that much anymore with the mixed fertilizers. But just always pay attention to the NPK ratio for what you need. So like if your nitrogen is high, you obviously don't need any more nitrogen. Don't go buy a mixed fertilizer blend that's high in nitrogen. Look for one that's low in nitrogen and higher in phosphorus or potassium or whatever. And then there are two ways you can fertilize. You can get the granular fertilizer and you're actually fertilizing the soil. You're putting it in the soil and it's activated when it gets wet and releases and it gets to the roots and things like that. Or you can do something called foliar feed, which that's what I do with urine. I dilute urine. I'll put like 1/4 gallon to 1 3/4 gallon water. I have a 2-gallon watering can, so what I do is I fill it up to, I fill up 1/4 gallon of urine, and then I fill the rest of the 2 gallons up with water, and then I sprinkle it on directly on the leaves of the plants that I'm wanting to fertilize. I've been doing that with the pumpkins. I do it probably every couple weeks, and it's kind of a quicker way, and it works especially with soil in Florida that's very sandy, very porous, and or not porous, but very fast draining. You can water the ground with it, but it will drain faster, and the roots won't be able to get all the nutrients out of it as fast enough. So I sprinkle it directly on the plant leaves, and you can do this with anything that you're not gonna, my rule is I do it on anything that I'm not gonna eat raw. So for example, I don't do it, I know some people will talk about, you know, the sunlight kills the germs and stuff like that, and I'm not denying that. I just, for my own comfort, I will do it on things like these pumpkins, because I'm not going to eat raw pumpkins. They're going to be cooked. And beans, I'm not going to eat. You can eat raw beans, like green beans and stuff like that. We cook them, so they're going to be cooked. It's going to be fine. anything like that that I would cook, I will use urine as a foliar feed. Something like greens, I'm not going to use it because I'm going to be eating that raw, and there's a chance that I could get contaminated. Even with stuff like tomatoes or cucumber or something like that, I'm not going to use it because it's something that I can just eat raw, and I just don't want to take a chance. But you can use compost tea, and there are various ways to make compost tea. There's aerobic and anaerobic. If you're going to make aerobic compost tea, you've got to get the supplies to do it, the aerator and all that stuff. If you're going to make anaerobic, you just put it all in like a big barrel or a garbage can or something like that. That's not got any openings, and toss in there whatever you're going to compost, and then fill it up with water and just let it rot. So with aerobic compost tea, it's safer to use on things that you're going to possibly eat raw, but still do your research. But with anaerobic compost tea, like what I would normally use, again, the same rule applies for using diluted urine. I'm not going to put it on things I'm going to eat raw. I'll use it on things that I will cook. But again, you use it as a foliar feed. You probably, I would do a similar ratio, and then sprinkle it on the actual leaves of the plant. And of course, you've got liquid fertilizers that you can buy at the store. You've got earthworm castings that you can use, and that's a very, very nutrient dense form of fertilization. And you can even use Epsom salt. Epsom salt's high in magnesium, and it's magnesium chloride, so of course it's high in magnesium. You can use that. You can toss some of that into some compost tea. Comfrey is really good to put in compost tea. Moringa is good. That's why I'm trying to grow moringa trees, so that I can either just chop and drop them, or I can take them and put them in compost tea and get the nutrients from it. So that's about, from my level of knowledge, that's about the extent of it. Get out there and do your research and experiment. Figure out what you like the best. Figure out what works the best in your area on your plants. Like I said, I've used liquid fertilizer. I still use liquid fertilizer, a foliar feed, and then I primarily have gotten to where I like to just sprinkle in the granular fertilizer and use that. And yeah, that's about it. And as far as soil amendments go, I mean, that's technically soil amendment. You can, if you're in an area with very sandy soil, you can add some clay. You can get clay and add a little bit of it in to kind of make it more loamy. And vice versa, if you live in an area where there's a lot of clay, then you can get sand and add it to try to make it a little bit more loamy, because loam is the perfect ratio of clay to sand. So I don't fool with that. I just pretty much go right into the sand. But that's something you can do. So but get out there, do your research. Search on the internet. You can buy books all about it. There are YouTube videos all about it, and figure out what works best for you, for your garden, what responds well. And I cannot encourage enough to get, pay the little bit of money to get the soil analysis done. It will save you a lot of guessing work and a lot of headache. So that's all I've got for today, and I will talk with you all later.